the deal. I'm Mashi Scanlan, of course. Denis Stranjak on the other end here. Interesting combo. I just did the math on this, Denis. 75 years of total life experience between us. So
Equally divided, roughly, I'd say, right?
I don't know about roughly. I'm like half
I
again as
think
old as
I
you
think
are.
if you polled members of the public on which of the two of us is doing more lifting on those years, I think the answers would go pretty heavily in your favor. So I think you're good.
Maybe if you were clean shaven, it'd be a little different. It was funny because doing the intro, I was like, well, I could talk about Denis being a professor of marketing at Trinity College. I'm an attorney. I'm not practicing anymore. Formal CMO and all this stuff. But then it's like we're not really doing a marketing podcast, which is kind of what all of our degrees and experience would kind of trend towards. But I think it's life that's the great teacher, and so we've lived life and we've traveled a lot. So I think those are the real big, on the CV. I think that's why I led with that. Although 75 years, I guess not that much. If you just talk to one person and capture all that
That's
knowledge.
one old person, yeah, right?
Yeah. Nonetheless, here we are, two halves of an old person on Here's the Deal. Denis, I wanted to talk. We had a question about parenting and being a parent in the professional workplace. Of course,
You
Zoom
picked a
has
great
changed.
episode to list our bona fides, considering neither of us had children.
Neither of us are parents, right? That's true. And we're on Zoom. And I think that, parenting and working from home and Zoom, that's all kind of come together, it's post-COVID that we never grew out of. But here we go. Parenting. Despite my manager being a parent themselves, they're emotionless and oddly cold towards me being a mother. My 2-year-old son has been going through some developmental testing, and I took the day off to bring him to one of his appointments. The next day, so this is the day after the testing, the next day I joined a team call with my manager, and my son came in while I was on the call and gave me a brief hug before his dad brought him off to have breakfast and to daycare. It didn't disrupt the call or my attention or focus. Despite this, after the team left, I had a brief catch up with my manager where I told him how the developmental testing was going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He briefly said he was happy the tests were going well. Then he proceeded to tell me that while he is, quote, more understanding than most, that your ears are pricking up. And said, well, Denis, though I'm more understanding than most, ... Anyway, that my son should be in daycare and that my attention should be on my work and not my son. No tact and pretty heartless. Where's your head at with this one? What's the deal with this one, Denis?
What's the deal with this one? So there's something that I noticed immediately right here, just based on the pronoun usage throughout the course of this question, which is that the person refers to themselves as a mother and they refers to their manager as he. And so right off the bat, they said, despite manager being a parent themselves, there is a still very gendered societal approach to working mothers and working fathers, right? And you can see this in like labor participation statistics and wage gaps and stuff. I think a third of mothers don't work in the US. And like I think labor participation in Ireland is like 62% for women and over 70% for men. And that is because of stay-at-home mothers. That is the big gap there, right? So I would, first of all, I would be curious to know if this manager has a stay-at-home mother for their kids, and that is why they have this like clean, hyper, surgical separation of work from work and home. But you mentioned Zoom at the start, and you're right. This is a relatively new phenomenon, right? Before 2020, very few people had work from home jobs. You and I were ahead of the trend there, honestly, and that we would have a lot of our work at the time like this. And stuff would happen. People would come in, a package would arrive, a dog would come into the room, your roommate, like that would happen. And those disruptions were normal. And it's not like the office life is without disruptions. All that kind of stuff happens all the time there too. So I don't know that this is necessarily about a focus on your job problem. Well, I don't know if the manager is trying to like exert some additional control or just being judgmental, but I do think there is an element of misogyny underlying it.
I mean, I any workplace situation between a man and a woman, you'd be hard pressed to, it's difficult because of not because of overt, like, when you say misogyny, it doesn't have to be overt. It doesn't even have to be like, malicious or anything like that. It's just societal norms. We live in a misogynistic world, and, which isn't to say that, again, there's ill will or intent there. That's kind of how society's developed, right?
There's a book that I read recently that I would highly recommend, that Nikki recommended to me, my wife, which is called Invisible Women. It's by I looked at the author's name here to double check it. It's Caroline Shriado Perez. And it talks about that and this sort of like inherent bias. Because like you're right, when you say misogyny or sexism, and I now hate that we're venturing into the territory where this is a podcast in which two men explain sexism, but that's anyway.
Yeah.
Um, you do think of like super overt, over the top stuff that you would necessarily
Mhm.
see in films and movies, and that does happen in the world, obviously. But
Oh,
below that, there are all of these sort of inherent biases that women get punished for behaviors in the workplace that men get rewarded for. Well, where men are considered headstrong, women are considered like brash or annoying for exactly the same behaviors. And there's even like more like financial stuff talking about labor participation, things like that. So it's hard for me to see past that undercurrent in this situation here.
mhm. I mean, it's funny that was a big takeaway. And I wonder if reading Invisible Women or maybe having that in your mind, kind of because all the things that influence us around our day, whether it's an episode of TV, a book we're reading, a
Mhm.
podcast we're listening to, start to affect how we see things. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing if you're educating yourself and growing. The first thing I thought here was, okay, we are people. Okay, this is such a human interaction. This myth, and I hate this. I hate this, and work from home has changed this. But even at the office, this myth that, well, this is work time, and 100% of your focus needs to be on work time. You're on the clock. Why aren't you working? It's like, get real for a second, okay? Do you want me to be good at my job? Do you want me to enjoy working here? Do you want me to be productive? Or do you want me to hate every second I'm here? And you want to be so draconian that I will actively start thinking in my mind about taking that extra 5 minutes when I go to the bathroom. How can I cheat? What can I do to chisel more and more time, more and more of my personal time out of this horrible, overt, draconian work culture and work philosophy, right? Forget it. Remove gender from this for a second. Even if it was one man talking to another man, it's like, well, Dennis, your focus should really be on the work. Your little boy should be coming in. Or Dennis, Yuri shouldn't be jumping into our calls. You get pretty distracted by your cat, stuff like that. It's just like, Mashi, fuck off. Like, I don't even know how to interact with this. This is
The part
such.
that
This is. Sorry, go ahead.
the part that jumps out at me is that your son should really be in daycare. Why? What do you
That's
mean?
true. Yeah. You know, what is that supposed to mean? Why? Are you paying for daycare? Is the company
Right.
paying for daycare to do all this? So also it's just like, no, my son should be at home with my husband or my wife because that's the choice we've made and
It's
that's
not
the
even
life we're
that's right.
living.
It's
You
not
know
even like
what
this
I mean?
person was minding their kid at home alone, right? The father is there and the kid just wanted to come in and say hi. I don't think that's a big deal. Now, look, we're only getting one side of the story here. I don't know that this is, the latest in a pattern of distracting behavior or whatever.
Sure.
But I'll be honest, it is hard for me to imagine a series of events leading up to this point that would make it okay for this manager to go, yeah, but your kid really needs to be in daycare so that you can focus. Come on.
I also just don't like, I don't even care if it's a series of behaviors. Like, if we're on a call every day and it's a morning call and, I don't care if it's presentation. I don't care if the CEO's on there. We're all people. Your son wants to come in and give you a hug, even if it does distract you, even if you're presenting, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me for a second. My son is here. He's going to
Mhm.
head to breakfast in daycare. I'm not going to see him for 8 hours. I'm going to give him a hug. Yeah, give him a hug. I mean, this goes back to this idea in my mind of, again, being human. There's room to be a person, to have interests outside of work, even when you're at work. And family is primary among them. Now I want to take all the malicious, we talked about misogyny and I was saying it wasn't malicious. This could come from a good place. This could come from, Dennis, you don't know this, but I have no problem with your son coming in every day to give you a hug, but the executives, they grumble about it, and then all of a sudden it's not even my misogyny or my grumbling or my issues with parenting. I'm trying to help you. Hey, people have noticed this a
That's
lot.
passing the buck, though. I don't know if I agree
I
with
think it
that,
is
dude.
too.
You
And I
know?
think, I'm trying to defend the manager a little bit here. I don't like this situation at all because what should really happen again, and this really speaks to a culture problem, by the way, I think, because what should really happen is if something like that's really happening, someone should say, here's the deal. We're all parents here. I think we can all understand that. I think we can all understand what's going on here. And maybe everyone needs to back off and let everyone parent the way they want to parent and spend a few minutes in the morning with their child. But if that's not the work culture that this is taking place in, if that's not an allowable thing, what this says to me is this is a work culture where you log in or you zoom in, and by God, it's all business. You don't have a life anymore.
Punch
You're at
card,
work
yeah.
now. Yeah. And I hate it. And I think that's massively unhealthy. My advice, you know, in our last few podcasts, I've said things like take control of the situation, talk to your manager about it. I wouldn't say that here. I think that this is just so kind of beyond the pale and shows a bit of being checked out that I'd be a little bit nervous to talk to him about it. So my genuine advice here, now I could be wrong. I'm not part of the relationship. Maybe someone's having a bad day, but not if someone's having a bad day, you don't write into a podcast to say, what the hell do I
Right.
do here? Honestly, I think it's find a different position, find a different manager, move on. Because this doesn't indicate to me, I have no idea. This is an anonymous thing. I don't know who it is. I don't know where they work. To me, it's like, this is probably not a work culture you want to be a part of. And
I agree.
people,
It does sound indicative of a larger problem than can be fixed with a frank conversation, right?
Mhm.
Also, the tone suggests to me it's not the first kind of these run-ins they've had.
Exactly.
Um, it is interesting that this is the first time in the episodes we've done of this, and in my life talking to you, that you've suggested maybe it's time to cut your losses. I've never heard you
Yeah.
suggest like, all right, let's pack it up as the most rational course of action.
And well, this really goes to the we talked about this. Like, there's this dichotomy. It's a non-symmetrical relationship, manager to person. And the reason that I'm worried in this scenario is it's not that there's not such a thing as rogue managers, but rogue managers exist in bad culture. If there's someone else you can talk to where you think it'll be fruitful, whether it's HR, something like that, and not just rain hellfire on you as soon as it comes out, I would suggest doing that. But this is such a weird experience. This is something I don't know about a European company. At a US company, at the right company, there could be serious repercussions for a comment like that.
We are much less litigious over here than outside of the Atlantic in general. I agree with that.
Well, I'm not even saying like in terms of lawsuit. It's just more in terms of like there could be some serious HR repercussions depending on the company and depending on the industry, right? We're both gamers, although I haven't played a game in ages. And I mean, you could see the gaming industry is just massively toxic, and nobody would care, right? Like you see this in Blizzard and Activision. I forgot who makes League, Riot Games. Like there's kind of rampant stuff that's involved with sexism and stuff. I don't know if they've cleaned that up or not, but it feels like their HR might be on deaf ears and it's time to move on. This is just a very weird comment that, I think at a large US company could get you into some real trouble.
Do you not think that makes it more likely to be a rogue manager and a bugbear that this individual has rather than like a systematic issue?
It's really hard to say.
It
But
is
I
out of
do,
pocket. I agree with you. It's a weird thing to say.
rogue managers, unless they're new, they feel empowered to make the comment. I mean, they're not really rogue managers, right? Rogue managers doing stuff that nobody knows about and nobody understands.
Right. I guess that's
I've worked with
different.
some people who are rogue managers. It's really context dependent. But if this person feels safe and empowered to make these comments, that's a question about culture. That's indicative of the culture of the workplace. It could be a rogue manager, just don't know enough, right? But this person who wrote this question, she'll know. She should know. If you know what the culture is like at your workplace
What the
or in your
surrounding
division
context
or
is,
in your department or whatever it is. You always do know. This is just such a touchy one, because you're going to bring it up and go, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or you're taking it the wrong way. I was just trying to help you out. It's not me, but other members of the executive team or other members of the team have made comments, and I'm just passing it along. And there's all kinds of ways where you try to grab the bull by the horn on this one, and it involves family, it involves gender, it involves all kinds of things. So what are you going to say? Dennis, you're a parent too, and I want to express to you in this safe space how much it upset me that you made that comment about my son coming in to hug me during the meeting. I think that's going to be shields up, defense all the way. Now, if
I
it
don't think
turns
you can
into
approach it like that. No, yeah.
yeah, and if it turns into I was giving you good advice, open your damn ears and listen, then you're like, oh, okay. Where's my resume?
All right. Here's
But
the deal. It sounds like if you don't think that the situation for you is solvable with a frank conversation or someone else in the company that you can talk to, which it sounds like is unlikely, then it might be time to start looking at further afield and think about what's important to you. Do you care more about the work you do in this job, or do you care more about your son in a trying time in his development? Right. When you laid it like that, it sounds very obvious financial
No
implications.
brainer.
But it might be time to start taking a half step back, examining your options, and figuring out what balance makes more sense for you.
I mean, that's so huge. I went over that. And I just like my son is having developmental problems. So I just want to understand, like, and again, this is super aggressive, and you'd never present things this way. But the real fact of the matter is, my son's having developmental issues, and your kind of comment when I've shared this with you is, don't let him hug you in the morning before he has breakfast and goes to school, goes to daycare. Like, that's actually the advice that was given, right? It is inappropriate for your developmentally challenged son, you're not developmentally challenged, but your son who's going through some developmental issues, to come in the morning and give you a hug before he has breakfast and goes to daycare. That's the actual feedback here.
That is the
it
yes.
boggles the mind, right? It doesn't, like, when you, context is important, and obviously I'm painting this in a certain light to put my thumb on the scale, but here's the deal.
You
That
haven't
ain't
said
gonna
anything
fly.
untrue though. At the same time, like those, that is fundamentally what it boils down to.
And so that's why it's like, it's just beyond the pale a bit in my mind. And maybe I'm, it makes a better podcast if we lean into it, right? It makes for better discussion. Right. It's more inflammatory. But again, there could be, I go back to what I said, there could be some genuine, like, I'm trying to help you out here advice. But if that's what it takes to get ahead in this company, maybe it's a company you don't want to be at. That's what I'm suggesting here. So, there you go.